Good morning. This is C again. And a few years ago, I created another identity I called the Inventress. And so this video is about those ideas. And of course, that was based on a Craigslist ad. I got started with the Craigslist ad in Boston. But I was running an ad in Boston because I wanted to go to Boston. I did make it to Boston, but that's another story. I started out that Boston trip, by the way, on $20. And I made it all the way to Boston with just $20. Anyway, enough of my antics. So, the Inventress, right. So I was going through a stage where I was developing a lot of ideas around intellectual property, because it got to the point by 2020, 2019, 2020, where I had created so many ideas out of frustration and an inability to execute anything. I just kept coming up with new ideas. So I have this whole catalog of ideas, and the ideas, a lot of them had to do with books I wanted to write. And I still want to write them, of course, I shouldn't say that. Books I want to write. And inventions that I want to invent, and that are all between my ears, safely tucked away. But anyway, so the Inventress. So I got this idea. Actually, the idea for the book came when I was in Missouri. Driving around Missouri. And I had read a book by Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill lived quite a while ago. And he wrote some books on happiness and, some of these. He was like one of the first authors to write a book about a successful mentality that would lead to great wealth. And I thought about taking the format of one of his books, because I don't believe there is one currently like that. That no one has taken that, what I believe was a very successful form, and applied it to anything else. What he did was he interviewed many very successful men at the time, like Carnegie and these other types that were coming up in the world at the time, and interviewed them to write his book. And I wanted to not only create an organization for intellectual property and a non-governmental organization, but I wanted to write a book to go with it. And the book was going to be very similar to his. I wanted to interview inventors, and not necessarily rocket scientists, but perhaps just, if he's still alive, I met the fellow who invented I was going to call it a bubble wand, but it was actually that giant bubble maker. He used to live down the street from me on the corner of West End Avenue and 100th Street in Manhattan. And I was very interested to talk to him. It cost me a relationship that I was in because the fella I was dating saw me talking to him and got really jealous and broke up with me. I wasn't really interested. I believe the man was married, and I guess I was just excited to talk to him, but it wasn't that I was excited to talk to him because I was looking at him as a prospective mate or anything. I was just excited to talk to him because he was an inventor, and he was the first inventor, to my knowledge, that I had ever met. So I really had a lot of questions for him. So I I thought that it would be a good book to write because it occurred to me that there are a lot of people, and I spoke about this in the general education video toward the end, that, naysayers can be a real problem. People let them become a problem because they don't rationalize what just happened. They don't sit there and think about, well, who was I talking to? That they weren't rejecting your idea because it was a bad idea. They were rejecting your idea for their emotional reasons. And I wanted to write a book that not only talked about that dynamic in human beings so that people could feel encouraged and supported in seeing their ideas through, but to give them evidence in the book with interviews of people who had ideas and put them into action, even though people were saying things, negative things about it, if they told them, and how they handled that situation. And then I wanted to dedicate a section of the book to the characteristics to identify what a good idea is based upon the compilation of interviews. So they're going to have this characteristic, that characteristic, and the other. And to have a sort of a section of the book where you could answer they often have these questionnaires, or they used to have these questionnaires to evaluate your relationships. And I wanted to create a questionnaire for the book in this book that would evaluate the quality of your idea, as it meets the criteria, the characteristic criteria. Nothing to do with divulging the idea itself, but just if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck. It is a duck. It's going to be successful. It's likely going to be successful. So that was the basic idea for the book I'd like to write. Well, one of the books I'd like to write. Some of them are science fiction-like, but this particular one I thought would be very valuable and practical because people who lending institutions, banks, loan officers, could use it because a lot of them don't have any way to gauge what they're listening to, especially if they're listening to somebody talking about something that's never been invented, to try to guide them through this process to make a determination. Is this a lunatic I'm talking to, or is this just an inventor? Because a lot of people sound kind of crazy, and there's no there's no way when there's no context because you haven't invented the thing, nobody's ever seen anything like it before. It makes it kind of difficult for a loan officer to navigate and say, well, how am I going to make a determination that this is a good business risk? So maybe a small section at the end of that section, like a note to investors or financiers, that sort of thing. And talk a little bit about that to kind of educate them a little bit. And so that was the idea from the inventress. So along those same lines, I wanted to do this video. Because I did want to touch on this subject of all sorts of ideas, whether it's a type of a business, new ideas, whether it's a type of a business or a book or whatever it is that you're wanting to birth into the world that's not currently something that they can see, touch, or feel. Sometimes you have blueprints. Sometimes you might have a manuscript, but motivating people to read that manuscript, is not necessarily a talent that you've developed yet. And I just want to encourage people with new and different ideas, because there's so much against you, especially socially. That's true of artists as well. I've been an artist, a professional artist, selling my artwork. The first time was I opened up business selling the jewelry I was making when I was 11. So a craftsman artist. And then after that, I had some paintings stolen, which was normal for the garment industry. In I believe it was it 77 or 78, which I then saw in Kmart for 2 years, which was kind of disturbing. But after that, since my mother took part in stealing them, she worked for A to Z Manufacturing, I figured I didn't owe her any damn rent. So she did that, and that's how I kind of resolved that in a way. I hope she made a good commission off of that. She better. Because I never got what I wanted, which was a job interview. But anyway, they just stole my work and didn't want to put me on the payroll. So anyway, yeah. And I also thought about this whole idea about if you go to the patent office, if you make less than I don't know, I think it's $213,000 a year, you can apply for a waiver, but they give you a different type of patent. One that is not necessarily, it's not long lasting. And so it'll keep you scrambling, and not a good idea. And it occurred to me that just because the